Report. This is the November 7th, 2023 meeting of the Bristol Planning Commission. This meeting primarily be a public hearing based on the bylaw modernizations that we've been working on. So it is 7:04 and I'll call the meeting to order. Our minutes taker is Carol Chamberlain, which has been introduced, but welcome. We're appreciative of your efforts. First item on the agenda is review agenda for addition, removal, or adjustment of any items per 1 VSA 312 D3A. Does anybody have any changes, additions that they would like to bring up?
Mr. Chairman, what you're asking for is changes to that item?
I'm asking the commission members if they have any changes to the agenda.
Okay. Yeah, I give an addition to the agenda.
This is for commission members.
Isn't this for public input also?
It is. We will be discussing with the public articles too. And then at the end of those articles, there is a slot for public comment.
Very good.
So will that satisfy you?
That would.
Okay. I would like to add an item. Let's call it, we'll insert it prior to public comment. So we'll call it item 3, public comment will become 4, blah, blah, blah. For a discussion by the planning commission of comments that we've heard tonight. Does anybody? That makes sense. Okay, so we'll do that.
Go over the Zoom concept.
Yeah. So as we go upon, I don't know if I got as fancy as what was usually done.
What is the select board does?
Yeah. So as we go into item 2, which is new business, which is the public hearing on proposed unified development regulations. I'll have this, I'd like to just give an introduction. On October 17th, 2023, the Planning Commission completed a draft for public hearing of proposed changes to its unified development regulations. Work it is undertaken pursuant to a bylaw modernization grant from the Vermont Department of Housing and Community Affairs, Development, not Affairs. The goal of the bylaw modernization project was to increase housing opportunities for residents of all income levels by making it easier to develop affordable, smaller homes and smaller parcels in the village planning area of Bristol as defined by the town plan. The Planning Commission believes these proposed changes further the goals of Bristol's town plan and conform to the state of Vermont statutes enabling municipal land use regulations. The Planning Commission believes the changes will promote thoughtful land development, implementing the Bristol town plan, and provide Bristol with more opportunities for right-sized housing in specific zoning districts within the planning area. So just a few items for protocol for public comment. All conversation should be addressed to the chair. The chair will recognize individuals for comment. Individuals shall identify themselves prior to commenting. Time allotment is 4 minutes per person per comment if we get wordy. Once a point is made, further comment on the same issue will not be heard. The public hearing allows the public to talk. The commission may ask clarifying questions, but should not further discuss or debate the issue during public comment. The Planning Commission is mindful that the deliberations of the commission are viewed with an overall benefit to the town, not necessarily of specific situations. For those on Zoom, if you could, when you're speaking, turn on your camera and so we can see you. If you would also keep your mic muted unless you are speaking, it creates obviously a lot of background noise. And is there other Zoom protocols that I missed?
The only one I'm looking at is we have somebody sitting online right now that I can't identify. The name is Pat. And if you could just provide your last name for the record, that'd be great. Okay, there we go. Oh,
Pat Sharp.
thank you.
Chicken wings.
And I was just gonna ask, whoever is Chicken Little, if you could please identify yourself as well, so we can have you on.
Chicken Little is Leslie Davis.
No,
Lily Davis.
Lil,
Thank you.
thank you.
And then Donald? You have Donald?
And I just had a Donald hop on. Do we have a last name that would be associated with a Donald?
Davis.
Perfect,
Hi,
thank you.
Chris.
Okay, I see Bill's on.
And
Okay. Does that take care of all the formalities?
believe so.
Okay, so we'll step into Article 2. First item is maps. The high density residential district has been expanded and the village residential district correspondingly reduced. So do we have,
If you go to the regs themselves, there's a map in the regs.
Perfect. Share this in just a second with folks. I just need to get where I'm getting. Start.
So the one that's to be removed is your existing regulations.
Let me just share this out with everyone.
so the next one down is, or the next set down is the village planning area.
Yep. I'll share that. Okay, so this is, as Adam was just saying, anything that says to be removed is our current regulations. The changes are here. The village planning area, which is the centered piece here, which is actually the next set of maps, or a zoom in on that so we can get into the details there. So these are our current conditions as you see them. And these are the proposed changes per planning commission.
Any comment with respect to the high density residential area? Hearing none, we'll go on to item B. The village business district has been expanded to include every parcel on the Bristol sewer system. And the residential office commercial area adjacent to that has been correspondingly reduced. Which on this map is the darker red, or where Bristol, where the word Bristol is. Is there any comments or questions about that?
Excuse me, are you asking the public?
Yes. So have you got a comment, Dave?
Mine is more general, but I certainly would make a comment at this point, and that is first, I was on the very first committee. I don't think we called it a planning commission, that wrote the zoning regulations for Bristol, first zoning regulations for Bristol. And the work that the planning commission does is incredibly important, and thank you all for serving and putting so much thought and effort into creating a vision for the future of Bristol. That's what the plan is. And it only works if the administration, namely the select board and their employees, notably the zoning administrator, actually enforce the plan and the zoning regulations thereof, which has been inconsistent over the years at best. The predominant belief among many Bristol residents is that private property is preeminently important and shouldn't be abridged by zoning regulations. And so, in many cases, building and development occurred outside of the plan and the zone and the zoning regulations because of the lack of the select board's willingness to require their staff and stand behind their staff when enforcement of zoning has been required. So I commend you for your work. It's important work. My hope is that it actually works, that the select board and the zoning administrator actually enforce the plan that gets voted on by the public, that you have worked so hard to develop, it gets voted on by the public to regulate development in the village, in the town as a whole, actually. Thank you.
Any other comments about village residential? Okay, so people online, we see some people, we don't see everybody, so if you have a comment and we're rolling past it without recognition, speak up and we'll come back and recognize you. Item 2. Uses. A, multifamily dwellings are proposed to be allowed with a site plan review in the village mixed district, currently a conditional use. In the village mixed district is, which color is that? That's the crosshatch?
Yes, sir.
So we're talking about the crosshatch area. So the change is it's recognized as a use as opposed to justifying it as a use, essentially. Is there any questions or comments about that? We'll move on. B, in-guest facilities are proposed to move from a site plan review to a conditional use review in the village business and the high density residential districts. Is there any comment or questions about that? Okay, item C in uses. Business yards are proposed to be eliminated as a permitted use in the village mixed district. They are currently a conditional use. Is there any comment about that? Go ahead.
I would also,
Can you just state your name for the,
certainly, I am Thomas Fox.
thank you.
Thank you. I would like to propose that the business yard use, conditional use, also be removed from the RA5 district.
Okay.
Oh, I have a statement I would like to read during the public comment period, if you would like for me to, or I could read it now if you'd like.
Is it regarding this?
Yes, it is.
Okay, go ahead if you want.
Okay, Mr. Chairman. The residents of Bristol Notch Road, that's where I live on the Notch Road, is an area that is zoned RA5. It is a neighborhood. I live in a neighborhood. Do any of you have any problem with calling it a neighborhood? Do you dispute that it's in a neighborhood? Okay, we will say that it is a neighborhood then. All right. The zoning guidelines for Vermont neighborhoods on page 29, under neighborhoods, states all industrial uses are not permitted. It's flat out, all industrial use, doesn't say heavy industrial, light industrial, this industrial, not permitted. In the marked up unified development regulations, what we're talking about, under definitions, page 101, business yard is allowed to have heavy equipment. Which, and what it says is 10-yard or larger dump trucks. And up to 95 or larger excavators, 95 horsepower or larger excavators or similar equipment, okay? If they run on a paved road. By that definition, there is no limit to the size or number of industrial machines that may be used in an RA5 neighborhood. It says, if they run on a pavement road, you can have any size truck, any size excavating equipment. The definition of business yard is not consistent with the Vermont neighborhood zoning guides. So the zoning guide said, no industrial uses, and this says any size truck you want. I think that is inconsistent. Either the definition of business yard must change, or business yard must be removed from the RA5 definition. My suggestion is to remove business yard from the RA5 definition. Business yard is not permitted in these districts: CON, HDR, VR, BPC, RA1, and RA2. All right, so the commonality among these districts, along with RA5, is that the UDR states these districts are primarily residential districts. So I'm going to read that again. Business yard is not permitted in CON, HDR, VR, BPC, RA1, and RA2 districts. These districts, along with RA5, that the UDR states are primary residential districts. It is inconsistent and inappropriate for business yard to be allowed in RA5 when it is not allowed in other primarily residential districts. Business yard is appropriately only allowed in commercial district C1. Business yard, and I believe this is how we got into this. Business yard was recently removed from VM in the marked up UDR. Okay, at one of the planning commission meetings that I watched on NEA TV, there was discussion of limiting the size of equipment allowed in RA5 to what a landscaping business might use. I interpret that to be a 2.5-yard dump truck and a 15 horsepower tractor, not a 10-yard or bigger dump truck and a 95 horsepower excavator. How did the definition that is in a marked up UDR get there? And this isn't a rhetorical question. I would expect an answer. Can we get an answer?
This is a comment, please.
Well, okay. So I will leave that. Permitted businesses that currently exist under Bristol Notch Road include, but are not limited to, maple sugaring, bed and breakfast, woodworking, and farming. All of these are appropriate uses that would suffer from an industrial scale business yard. That is a business larger than a landscaping business. The existing businesses invite visitors to come by for experience does not include noise and vibration caused by a business yard as currently defined, including 50,000-pound trucks passing by. All right, so a 10-yard truck, all right, a yard of material can weigh between 2,000 and 3,000 pounds by one definition that I've taken from the internet. All right, so it's the internet, but let's go with it. So 10 yards at 3,000 pounds is 30,000 pounds. If the truck itself weighs 25,000 pounds, which is not unreasonable, then the whole thing weighs over 50,000 pounds. Visitors who come to these businesses want to spend a peaceful day with family members enjoying a Vermont activity. If your intention is to promote housing in Bristol, allowing a business yard as currently defined in the marked up UDR in a residential area is counterproductive. Very few potential new residents are going to want to live near an industrial operation. The only other district beside RA5 that allows a business yard is commercial C1. And C1 is not intended to expand housing opportunities in Bristol, but does include light industry. And that is my statement, and I have questions, one of which I read, but did not get an answer to.
Okay,
Can you email me a copy of that document?
I can hand you a copy and I can email you a copy.
It would be great if you could email it to me, or I could take a hard copy as well. That way I just get it in the minutes. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
any other comment on business yards? I will say, Tom, that we have reconsidered it, and some of the stuff he quoted was discussion, it wasn't actually approved. Discussion, it wasn't an approved aspect. Whereas what we ended up approving is what is in the current proposed bylaws. And some of that was based on conversations before the commission.
So just, how can I get answers to my questions?
And what are your questions?
Okay, so. First one was, how did the definition that is in the marked up UDR get here? Right, because it says, a 10-yard truck or bigger and a 95 horsepower or bigger.
So that was through discussion, and there was a motion, and it was carried by the board to make that the definition.
Okay, but that is no definition that says you can drive anything.
Well,
marked.
no, we're not here to debate. You asked how, and I
Okay.
told you how.
Fine, excuse me. And the other question that you may have already answered is, can we remove business yards in Part A5?
That was discussed, and again, as a planning commission, we did not remove it. It was, the vote was not carried to remove it.
Okay.
Through the process.
But I do not expect that to be the final word, because the UDR is not finalized.
As it stands right now, that's where it stands. So the process right now is we go through public hearings, entertain public comment, consider it, and then it goes to the select board for a series of public hearings as well. So, yeah, I mean, it's not sealed and it's not set in stone yet, but it's very, very far along the process. We have we'll have some very short review period before it goes back to the select board. Because their meetings are already set, so we've got to be sensitive to that. So that may or not be a good reason, but that's what it is. So, and so those were the two questions you were speaking of?
Yeah, I think pretty much.
Okay. Okay,
Can I make a comment about this section?
sure.
So, it's confounding that the language is X number of size or larger. It should either say any tractor or any equipment, or it should say such and such a size or smaller. Doesn't make sense to me to have the phrase X number of pounds or larger, or X number of horsepower or larger. And the other thing I would say is that my homeowner's insurance will cover a tractor up to 39. So maybe this counters Mr. Fox's testimony to a certain extent, but I would say that a 39 horsepower tractor could easily be in an RA5 district. Not necessarily as an industrial use.
Okay,
It may be worth clarifying that the size restrictions were the caveat of access to a paved road
that's,
within that definition.
that's,
That is correct, and I did state that.
Just so everybody's clear on that, that's what that size cutoff was for, was anything over that. To have direct access to paved roads.
And there is nothing in the regulations that do not permit anything bigger than that. You have, in a business yard, you can operate and drive on the road from the business yard onto a paved road, any size vehicle you want. Which does not seem correct.
Can I inquire of your statement? But that may make sense, so the notion, what's intended here is to say that if a piece of equipment is bigger than some size, it must have access to a paved road. And that's the way the language is written, or does it need to be corrected?
It's right here.
That's the way the definition was written on
Yeah. Thank you.
anything else on business yards? Move on to item 3, village business district. And this has to do with dimensional changes. And within the village business district, which is the downtown area. Several dimensional standards were within the district allowed up to 8 units. I'm sorry, several dimensional standards within the district allowed up to 8 units per acre were reduced to a minimum lot size of 5,000 square feet are proposed. Any comment or question about that? Also, the density and height bonuses within this district for affordable housing are included as required by the Home Act for areas served by both water and wastewater. So that is in there, and that is a required by state statute. So any questions or discussion about that? In district item number 4 of this, residential office commercial district. This district is slightly reduced, losing some parcels to the village business district that we just talked about. Is there any questions or comments about that? Okay, next one, village mixed district. Several dimensional standards are proposed to be changed to allow for up to 4 units per acre and reducing the minimum lot size to 10,000 square feet. Several dimensional standards are proposed to be adjusted to better reflect existing development patterns. Is there any comments or questions about that?
Yeah, my name is Randy Durant, and I am curious if in this decision about this most easterly village mixed, really it's outside the village, were there any conservation issues that were factored into this decision to raise the number of dwellings from 2 to 4? Because I think there are some issues here, and I was wondering if you discussed them.
So I think what the answer to that would be is there are floodplain, there's another section dealing with floodplains within the zoning regulations.
Yes.
So if any of that property is within a floodplain, which it might be being on the river, you know, that would change how you can develop that.
Well, according to one of the maps in the town plan, on page 106, flood hazard area, the section that I'm talking about in Rockydale is in a river corridor, and at least half of this crosshatched area is in the flood hazard area. So I would think that that might be a factor in deciding to increase the density with the flood, the corridor and the flood hazard area being right there. The second concern is on page 98 in the plan. There's a map of the wildlife corridor and connectivity. And it indicates that in the town of Bristol, there are about 10 wildlife corridors. And of the 10, the biggest by far is on the west end of this village mixed area in Rockydale. And so the question is it really a good idea to increase the density of dwellings in a wildlife corridor, which actually in another part of the plan is described as extending from the Lord's Prayer Rock to the second bridge, or excuse me, to Rockydale Gardens. And so that is all corridor. So I would wonder why that would be a great place to increase dwelling density.
Okay. We'll take that under consideration. Any other comments about the village mixed district?
Let's see. I'm trying to get my hand raised. Oh yeah, here we go. Sorry. Start my video. This is Sally, and I was just wondering on that last comment, if it makes sense to have development where there's really good pedestrian access. Because I'm not sure there is at this point going out that way toward Rockydale. It's really difficult to bike or walk from there without, you know, scary traffic situations. I don't know if that's been a consideration or not. That's all.
Thank you. Anything else for village mixed? Next one is high density residential district. High density residential district is proposed to expand into the village residential district to provide more opportunities for housing. An incentive is proposed to create two-family dwellings, duplexes, by allowing them to be built to a density of 5 units per acre, a 25% bonus over other residential construction. What that basically means is you can have one duplex on 0.4 acres instead of 0.5 acres within an acre. So you could have like 3 single-family residences and 1 duplex. There's the wording can get kind of confusing at times. Is there any comments or questions about that?
I have a question.
And you are?
I'm Betsy Blair. I got my hand raised.
Okay, go ahead.
And that is that the map, I can't see the key to it, so it would be helpful when you are discussing something to say what color it is on the map.
Okay,
So what color are we talking about right now?
talking about the darker cyan color.
The predominant blue on the map.
And if you raised up
I know when I do, I lose some of it.
yeah, if you just raise up so you can identify it, your color, and then bring it back down.
So it's this, oh, you can't see my cursor, right?
No. So it's
It's the stuff that is from, it's below the pink, diagonal hatched stuff, right? Well, it surrounds it.
yes.
Okay,
Yeah, it's where North Street on the map, Betsy. It's where you can see the words North Street, Mountain Street, and East Street. That is the color of the map that we are discussing.
Okay.
Does that
And
help?
yeah, and so this you said was to be what kind of density?
So the density has not changed except for the ability to put a duplex on 0.4 acres instead of 0.5 acres.
Okay. And what is the density of that pink hatched stuff that I gathered was a high density? I mean, does that mean 6-story buildings? What does it?
No, so that, our proposal is to make that density the same as what the blue is, the high density residential area. So no, there's no density, there's nothing that's denser than what we call the high density residential district being proposed.
Okay, and so you're saying that that is sort of 2-family houses is what you call high density?
It's typically single family, but there is, as we had itemized under item B, is there is an allowance to build 2-family units a little bit denser than single family.
Okay. And this is the extra unit on top of the garage or something, right?
No, that is a separate thing.
Oh, and what's that thing
So-
called?
If you have a unit that's separate from the house, it's called an accessory dwelling unit. And accessory dwelling units can be within the house, main house, or they can be in other buildings on the property.
And which kind of zoning category is that in?
They're in all.
Oh, okay.
And it is a state regulated type of development. And we pretty much followed what the state had for minimum requirements within our zoning regulations.
Okay, thank you.
And is there any other questions for HDR?
I do have one question.
And who is this?
Don Davis.
Okay, thank you.
So on Plank Road, I see that it's now the darker blue on one side. Is that area getting pulled into the village area, or is that still just a,
So the proposal is to bring that into the high density residential area. And then the lighter blue that's to the top of that and to the left of that would stay as village residential.
Yes.
So that would remain unchanged. So that district is being kind of split, if you will. Some of it will remain unchanged and some of it will be moved into the high density residential.
okay, so, yeah, I'm in the area that's switching to the high density. I just was trying to determine if the village, the area of the village was getting increased.
I don't understand your question. So the-
Yeah, I'm just about in the middle of where you're circling there.
Yep.
But yeah, I just wasn't sure. It's just for high density. It's not for redrawing the village line,
what do you
correct?
mean- What do you
No,
mean by the village line?
so Don, the old village line was dissolved many moons ago. The closest we have left is the police district. And there's no discussion from this group or even at the select board level at this point to change where the police district would be. That's about the only defining thing we have left with in regards to the old village.
Okay,
Does that help?
yeah, that's great. Thanks. I'm behind the times, I guess.
Mr. Chairman, could I address this question?
Yeah, if you got further clarification or questions.
Yeah, it might help to think of this as we have this thing, it's called the village planning area, right? And it includes the core village that you see today. And, where the town sees the future growth of the village, so like the core village expanding. I think that's what you were talking about. You kind of asked, is this the village expanding? And sort of, yes, we're trying to open up housing, get more housing in unfilled spaces, and you see here extending like essentially the future footprint of the village. I don't know if that's helpful, but you're kind of right about that in that sense. We're just planning ahead,
I am, I'm tracking now. Thank you very much.
Okay, any other questions about HDR? Okay, the next one is village residential. The size of the village residential district is proposed to be reduced in certain areas and combine it with high density. We kind of just talked about that. I don't know if there's any further discussion or not. Okay. Moving on to Article 4. Required regulations. And we already had somebody had a question about units in garages, but in this section, the section governing accessory dwelling units or ADUs was adjusted to conform with the Vermont statutory minimum requirements. Also, the term in the statute that refers to it being clearly subordinate was referenced and was further defined. So if there's any questions about ADUs? Okay, moving on. Article 10, definitions. Business yard. Proposed changes to the definition of business yard are to clarify the types of businesses and activities allowed and to specify access requirements for businesses with larger pieces of equipment. And we've sort of talked about this. I'm not sure if we have any more commentary or not.
I think I've said what I wanted to say.
Okay. Anybody else? B, hotel and inn guest facility. Proposed changes to require a manager on premises at larger hotels and on duty and available to respond in a timely manner at inns and guest facilities. Is there any questions or comments about that?
Can I ask how that relates to Airbnbs? Because there's been an issue in this state.
So it doesn't relate to them. Airbnbs, there's another definition that addresses Airbnb.
No, actually, we don't. Airbnbs are short-term rentals. Bed and breakfasts are addressed, but Airbnbs are not. They're short-term
Okay,
rental.
yeah.
And per Supreme Court ruling, was it 4 or 5 years ago? Up in the islands, if you don't have regulations around short-term rentals, a rental is a rental is a rental, whether it's 1 day, 1 week, 1 month, 1 year, 1 lifetime. We have none. You see towns like Manchester that have implemented some rules around them. Bristol doesn't at this point.
Might be wise to think about that. I know, I don't know of any case in Bristol. I am aware that there are areas of this state where Airbnbs have reduced regular housing, if you will, and exacerbated the so-called housing crisis. And if you're going to permit more building, with the notion that families are going to occupy these without any regulations on Airbnbs, what you might find happens, an unintended consequence of your new plan is that a lot of people build Airbnbs and it doesn't end up helping the housing problem.
Okay. Any other comments, consideration on the hotel inn definition? Okay, so that, unless there, the intent of this list was to highlight the main items of change. That doesn't mean that it encompasses everything. So I guess at this point, if there's other changes within the regulations that people have seen that we haven't addressed, you are welcome to bring that issue or that concern or that conversation up at this point.
You have a question. So I did not bring this statement in earlier today. I know I gave a copy to Chris, but can I bring it in like during the rest of this week or before the next meeting that you have scheduled on the 14th to be stamped and included in the minutes?
No, so that's what Chris has a copy
Are you
for.
gonna do that?
Yeah, these will be officially part of the minutes.
Oh, okay, very good then.
Okay, so now we are to the item that I had added, which is a discussion of comments made to date. I will summarize what I heard, and I'll stand corrected as I go through those. There was a general comment about historical lack of enforcement, and the hope that ongoing regulations are enforced. We had commentary on the business yard, specifically requesting it being removed from RA 5. There was a reference to neighborhood, which and there was also a reference to industrial uses within that commentary.
If you like, I can summarize that.
Is that complete? It's not
It's what complete.
what I just said.
Well, let me just read this and then you can decide. All right, so Bristol Notch Road is a neighborhood, and the zoning guidelines for Vermont neighborhoods, which is one of the documents that was listed in your email, your notice for this meeting, does not allow industrial uses in neighborhoods. And my point, a business yard is an industrial use. All right, so business yard is not permitted in these districts. CON, HDR, VR, BPC, RA1, and RA2. And the reason that I've chosen to list those districts is because in the UDR, those are also included with RA5 in residential districts. Those are called residential districts. Now, other districts in like C1 is not included in that. There's some other districts that are not included in that residential district definition. And the other summary point is one of the questions is how did the business yard get to include any size truck or excavator?
That was that we talked about that definition.
Well, we talked about what the definition is. We didn't talk about what it could be or should be. But I did mention that in my statement that in one of the planning commission meetings that I watched on NEA TV, right? You can get them on TV. There was a discussion of limiting the size of equipment allowed in RA5 to what a landscaping business might use, to a guy who cuts grass and, like the guy who does the green with.
And I think I mentioned before that was discussion that wasn't moved to me.
Right.
So.
But I'm just summarizing what my points were. Okay. So my interpretation of that is a 2.5 yard dump truck or a 15 horsepower tractor.
Okay.
Okay.
There was also a comment about specifying the minimum size with reference to the equipment restrictions or enablements as opposed to
open-ended.
As opposed to maximum size versus minimum size.
Right.
In Rockydale, there was commentary about should the density be increased regarding floodplain corridors in that area, wildlife corridors in that area, and pedestrian access. And then there was discussion regarding the definitions about if or how to regulate Airbnbs. Is there anything I missed with the comments?
Mr. Chair, so you didn't miss it, but I do have an additional thought.
Okay,
And I've been thinking about this size of equipment and access to paved roads. I live on Meehan Road. There's a section of paved road, not from my house, down the roadways that was paved. I think the primary thought in the select board was to pave this road because it was a curvy hill. It's very hard to keep gravel on it. And it was just better road maintenance, road practice to pave that section of road. I don't know if the select board made any consideration of the fact that that opened up property there to be industrial sites with large dump trucks. So that it seems like there's a disconnect between what's in the plan and what roads have been built or paved. If a road is paved for one reason, and then another unintended consequence is that it opens up what would be pretty difficult. I mean, this is a curvy hill, and you've probably all been on Meehan Road. It goes like this down the hill. And if somebody were to decide to put, big dump truck or excavator or whatever on the hill, that would not be good for the road or for the neighborhood or for, but it happens to be paved.
okay. Did you pick up anything else?
No, that's what I picked up as well.
So at this point, with definition of what we heard tonight, we can talk a little bit about it. It will be discussion. There will be no conclusions out of what we have here. We will continue the discussion on the 21st. And then we will either make some decisions real quick or the proposals stand as they are. So let's talk about I would say, unless anybody on the commission wants to discuss it further, I would say the comment about historical lack of enforcement is more commentary as opposed to something that we need to address in this plan. You have a hand up, Betsy?
Yes, I was just thinking about that landscaping issue, and I think it's the definition of landscaping that, as far as I can see, has changed in the last, I don't know, 25 or 30 years. I think landscaping used to be kind of like property maintenance, and now they are doing earth moving, changing the terrain and putting in full-grown trees and stuff like that. And so it may be that there's a disconnect in the understanding of what landscaping means.
Thank you. So I will open it up to the table for comment, for discussion, thoughts about the commentary on business yards. And John, you got your hand up.
Yeah, hi. Just a second before I get to business yards. I would just flag, not for discussion now, but maybe after we get these revisions done in the future, near future, to look at enforcement and how we do it and how we don't do it and what we might do differently. So I'd just like to flag that as future work for us. Regarding the business yard, I thought I was just making notes as people were offering comments, so if you don't mind, I'll just refer to those. I thought Tom's statement was interesting. I had not thought about looking at the other zones that are primarily residential as RA5 is, and it's a good pickup that RA5 is the only one where the business yard is allowed. So I just I'm still not totally comfortable with the definition of business yard. I'm not averse necessarily to having business yard in RA5 or other zones, but my discomfort really is with the definition. I just find it too loose, and I wonder if there isn't more we could do to tighten it up so that we are really trying to stay away from the sort of industrial end of the potential impacts and rule those out in the definition if we're going to allow business yard. So those are my comments on business yard.
Okay. Shannon.
I think I'm saying anything. I was just listening to everybody else. I was thinking it was their comment time. Sorry.
Okay. Slim. Slim.
Here, I'm here now. I made notes of most of these comments, and I also am strongly resonates with me what Tom said about the business yard, because this is a residential district, as has been stated. I'm only repeating, and we're trying to increase our homes for people, and having a business yard next door is not going to be a selling point. And I think a very good compromise may well be to change the definition of the business yard to only allow, well, we'll have to talk about it, but not heavy industry machinery, and they can find a place in a non-residential district. So I'm on board with that one. Thank you.
Rob. Okay. The commentary on Rocky Dale. Rob, you want to have any thoughts on that?
Yeah.
Slim? Slim, do you have any thoughts or comments? Or
No,
we should consider on Rocky Dale comments?
I'm not ready for a comment right now on Rocky Dale. Thank you.
Okay. Shannon?
I was feeling like we did that discussion. It was nice they pointed out. I feel like when we look at that area, there's really not a lot of room for development to begin with. And I think the changes we made were small down and minimal to that area.
Okay. John?
Yeah, I thought that was interesting pickup also on the village mix in Rockydale. I think I hadn't really noticed that the floodplain implication there. I think that'll be self-limiting probably, like the fact that it is floodplain means it won't get much density or much new development, but good pickup there. And the wildlife corridors, I'd never thought about that at all, frankly, I'm sorry to say. And it would be nice to look at those in the future and consider those when we make these kinds of decisions, and maybe in this one, vis-a-vis Rockydale. But yeah, I do think the fact that a lot of that is floodplain will just mean it doesn't get, we could make it whatever density we might, but in the end, because it's floodplain, that's going to limit it right there.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, Bill, I'm sorry. I've been asking all these questions and I've been going over you. So let's back up a bit. And if you have anything to share about business yards.
I think that's very complex. We want to be careful that we don't don't discourage people from building a business here in Bristol. And I think it would depend a lot on the density of the neighborhood. It might alter one's view of whether a business yard is appropriate or not. On the village district out in Rockydale, that's a legacy of the village plan. And in the early transition, we declined to, we were trying not to make too many changes at once. And so that was a carryover. And I don't remember discussing it when we went through this round. But I also believe because of the floodplain issue, it's highly unlikely much is going to change in that district. So that's what I'd have to say for now.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
And then the last comment we had was the regulation of Airbnbs. That we don't have a definition for right now. John, do you have any thoughts on that?
I don't have any thoughts on it. I'm an Airbnb owner and I'd be happy to talk operator and be happy to talk to anybody about that. Just informationally for anybody interested, Vermont Public Radio did a really good sort of 30-minute or so radio report on Airbnbs. And even though I've been an Airbnb operator for a while, it opened my eyes to some of the dimensions of that issue. So go find that online. That's worth talking about. So nothing about Airbnbs for me otherwise.
Okay, Bill?
Bill, you're muted.
Thank you. You may prefer that I stay muted, but I'll simply say that Airbnbs are much more of an issue in the resort towns and the ski towns than it is in Bristol. So I'd be disinclined to make much change there, but certainly be open to hearing suggestions.
Thank you. Shannon?
I agree with John as well. I'm also have an Airbnb, so I have not had an issue with it. I am outside the village, however, I'm not in the village where mine is. I don't really have comments that I feel are appropriate.
Good. Slim?
As I understand it, there's not much of an issue with it right now in town. We might be wise to think ahead though, and at least put a definition in and let us get started with recognizing a reality in today's world. That's all. Thank you.
Thanks. And Rob?
I wonder about how that process would work in terms of regulation. Is it strictly through the town plan or is it other means and zoning as well, of that, so, and how that enforcement would work, as that's not
Obvious.
yes. So
Okay. So I think that sums up the new item.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
it wasn't on the list because it wasn't so much of a question or something, but can I go back to Donald Davis's comments for a second before we move on?
Okay.
Very briefly. And I think this will sound like no news to people on the planning commission, but maybe it's helpful for the public. So just know that the work that we're presenting tonight, these proposed changes are by and large inside of what's called the village planning area, which was created by past planning commissions in response to the public and approved by the public, that basically put a circle around not just the current built out village, but a step out from there, sort of the future village, where the village could expand. And then we changed some, the planning commission back then, I wasn't on it back then, but the town and the public voted and, you know, basically said, yes, this is where the future of, you know, this is the future growth of the village. We kind of designated that village planning area for the future growth of the village. So the work a lot of what we've presented tonight is, you know, increasing some density inside the current and future village. And so maybe knowing that helps contextualize the whole proposal. That's all I want to say. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So the next item is public comment. I will remind everybody that we will, if we've talked about the topic already, that we don't need to talk about it again. So is there any public comment?
I would like to know when the next opportunity to get any kind of information about the business yard issue will be. Will it be at the next public meeting?
So we have another public meeting on the 21st. That will be pretty much the same format we went through tonight. And at that meeting, we will probably either discuss or we will discuss, move, or table, and that's about as good as I can say right now. Any changes that we may, as the commission, want to consider amending the proposed bylaws with based on what we've heard from public comment. If we don't make decisions, depending on how the meeting goes, if we don't make decisions at the end of the meeting on the 21st, and it becomes that table motion, if you will, we will have to have another meeting within the week to make those decisions in order to have us act on it so that it can go before the select board. And their meetings are the
4th and 11th.
4th and I think so. 4th and 11th of December.
So will these issues that we've discussed here tonight also be discussed by the select board at their meetings?
So the select board will see our plan as we submit it. They will have the narrative that basically built the agenda for tonight, explaining the changes. And then they will, I can't speak for them, but of course I would imagine they'll look at it and pass judgment as far as what they think it is and receive public comment. And then what they do with that public comment, they may take it under advisement, they may not. I mean, it's their prerogative.
Well,
And then they will incorporate any changes that they want into the proposed regulations. And they come back to the planning commission, or do they just go to the vote at that time?
They need to have, if they make substantial changes, they need to have another public hearing. At least 15 days after the substantial changes. And then, once they've had their hearing, they've made their decision, then they can take it to the public for a vote. So you do have the opportunity, even if the planning commission is unsympathetic, I'm not saying it will be, but you will have another chance to go before, well, you'll have a chance to go before the planning commission again next week, and then you'll have a chance to go before the 2 weeks select board. Excuse me, 2 weeks, correct, yes, and then before the select board.
On the 4th and possibly the 11th.
Of December, yes.
Okay, very good, thank you.
So any other public comment or questions? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to the next item, which is an adjournment. I'll entertain a motion.
I do have a question before we adjourn.
Okay.
I just wanted to go back to something you said at the end of the last section before we went around and comment and shared commentary. You said that there might be some other changes that we haven't described tonight. Are there any other changes? I mean,
Yeah, so we highlighted the major changes but there are other changes in there that some of them are grammatical. I don't think there's anything, I don't believe there's anything of substantive that we haven't covered tonight, but there are grammatical and there are some terms that were changed based on whatever. Within the regulations, if you go down through them, there will be some other changes that are minor. And I shouldn't use the term insignificant, but minor enough that they wouldn't raise eyebrows.
Is there a comprehensive list? And I'm not really talking about the copy editing things like periods and that sort of changes, but I mean, I feel strongly that somewhere there should be a full list. This is what's in the proposal and that's it. And
So if you go through the marked up copy of the proposed bylaws, they're all in there. Whether it's
I got to go find them all.
every change, well, go find them. I mean, you just scroll down until you see a different color.
Right. Okay, thanks.
Okay, you're welcome. Sally, do you have a closing comment?
Well, I do think it would be handy to have some sort of a brief list about those things that seem minor taken out of the main thing so people don't have to go through it to look for them. That would just be handy. Just say, oh, and these are the minor ones, just so people can see them.
So they're of, and this is my opinion, they're not of impact. And like I said, when I was just talking to John, they're all in color. So if you just roll down through the document, you'll see them all.
Yeah, but you have to read the stuff that's there in order to know if it's
No,
one
you
of the
don't. All
ones.
you gotta do is look for a different color. They're in blue, I think, or red.
Okay.
I felt it was pretty clear going through it on my phone, not even on a screen, so.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah.
Another thing that I wanted to bring up from today is, it's a question that's not something you covered, but I do have this questions and I think it might be a chance for maybe the Energy Committee and the planning to come together at some point in zoning. And that is, there aren't any regulations talked about in this housing kind of thing about what kind of energy, like building these different things is one thing, but building them to the specific building energy codes and stuff like that. So building energy codes, I think, is something that we should also talk about at some point and make sure we are doing that in a reasonable way too. I know it's a different subject, but I think it just reminded me when we talked about regulations and codes and all this, that is something that we need to do in Bristol too.
Okay. So we're kind of getting off topic here, but we do have one hand up. So do you have anything further to say, Betsy?
Well, this is sort of a spin off of the question of of B&Bs and is Bristol a vacation spot? Bristol may be one of the last places that's habitable in the US as temperatures rise. And so we could find probably a big market for B&Bs and second home perching places for people that still live someplace else. I don't know any way to get around that, but I think, it might be worth thinking about that. Is there any way to protect things for people who actually are employed? Like, I don't know, tax break or something or other, so that it isn't just an option for people from all over the country.
Okay, so I will go back to entertain.
Motion to adjourn.
Anybody second that?
I'll second it.
Shannon seconds, all in favor, say aye, raise your hand.
Aye.
Thanks, Betsy, for speaking up. I appreciate that.
Okay, anybody opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.